"You are useless to us, Scarlett," Luna Blackwood screamed, her perfectly manicured nails slamming the medical report onto the marble table so hard the sound echoed through the mansion's grand hallway. "What kind of daughter can't even give her parents a future?" Scarlett Blackwood stood frozen in the doorway, clutching her purse like a lifeline. Infertile, unwanted, already replaced in her parents' future plans. That same night, her father signed a contract that transferred her life to a man she had never met. Silas Gray, billionaire industrialist. The world believed she had been rescued. But in truth, she had been sold. And no one expected that the girl they discarded would become the most dangerous woman in the room. If you want to see how a rejected daughter becomes an unstoppable queen, hit that subscribe button and smash the like, because this story will leave you breathless. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday. Scarlett remembered because Tuesdays used to be her favorite day, the day her father would sometimes look up from his newspaper and ask about her week, the day her mother would occasionally smile at her over breakfast. But that Tuesday, 19 years into her life, everything changed with 8 words from Dr. Callahan's mouth. "I'm afraid your fertility prognosis is extremely poor." The medical office had smelled like antiseptic and lavender air freshener, a combination that made Scarlett's stomach turn. She'd gone alone to the appointment, seeking answers for the chronic pain that had plagued her since a childhood illness. She'd expected medication, perhaps physical therapy. She hadn't expected a death sentence. Not a literal one, of course. Her body would continue functioning. Her heart would keep beating. But in the eyes of Malcolm and Luna Blackwood, their daughter had just become obsolete. Scarlett had driven home in silence, the medical report sitting in the passenger seat like a ticking bomb. She'd rehearsed a dozen different ways to break the news, imagining her mother's concern, her father's reassurance that she was more than her reproductive system. She had been painfully naive. Infertile, Luna's voice had been ice cold, her beautiful face contorting with something that looked almost like disgust. "Are you certain?" "The doctor said there's a very small chance." "A very small chance means no chance," Malcolm interrupted, not even looking up from the contract spread across his mahogany desk. "In our world, Scarlett, potential is currency, and you just became worthless." The words had hit her like a physical blow. Scarlett had stood there in her father's study, surrounded by the leather-bound books and expensive art that screamed old money and power, and felt herself disappearing. That had been 6 months ago. Now, Scarlett sat at the breakfast table in the Blackwood mansion, pushing scrambled eggs around her plate while her cousin Elise laughed at something Luna had said. Elise Harrington, with her perfect blonde hair and her engagement to a senator's son and her very functional reproductive system, had become the daughter Luna had always wanted. "Elise was just telling me about the spring wedding plans," Luna said, her voice warm with an affection she hadn't directed at Scarlett in half a year. "June seems like such a lovely time for a garden ceremony, don't you think?" Scarlett nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She'd become a ghost in her own home, present but invisible, breathing but barely acknowledged. "Of course, we'll need to finalize the guest list soon," Elise chirped, reaching for her mimosa. "I was thinking at least 300. After all, the Harrington name deserves a proper celebration." The Harrington name, not the Blackwood name, because the Blackwood name, once synonymous with shipping empires and generational wealth, was quietly crumbling. Scarlett knew this because she still read the financial papers her father left scattered around his study. She knew about the failed investments in overseas shipping routes. She knew about the loans coming due, the creditors circling like sharks. She knew her father's pride had prevented him from asking for help until it was almost too late. She also knew, based on the hushed phone calls and the way Malcolm had started looking at her with calculating eyes instead of disappointed ones, that something was about to change. The change came that evening. Scarlett was in the library, her sanctuary, The one room where no one bothered to look for her, when her father's assistant found her. "Miss Blackwood, your presence is requested in your father's study. Immediately." The word immediately made her stomach drop. She found both parents waiting, seated like judges behind Malcolm's massive desk. There was a third person present, a man in an expensive suit whom Scarlett didn't recognize. "Scarlett, this is Dominic Hale," Malcolm said, gesturing to the stranger. "He's an attorney representing a business associate of mine." "A business associate," Scarlett repeated slowly, her mind racing. "Why am I here?" Luna smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Because, darling, we've found a solution to all of our problems." "Your mother and I have been in negotiations," Malcolm continued, his tone the same one he used when discussing quarterly earnings. "We've secured a very advantageous arrangement that will save the Blackwood legacy and provide you with a future you could never have achieved on your own." Scarlett's hands began to tremble. What kind of arrangement? Dominic Hale opened a leather portfolio, sliding a document across the desk. "A marriage contract, Miss Blackwood, between yourself and my client, Mr. Silas Gray." The room tilted. Silas Gray. Even Scarlett, who avoided high society gossip like the plague, knew that name. The billionaire industrialist who'd built an empire from nothing, who bought failing companies and transformed them into juggernauts, who never appeared at charity galas or society weddings. The man was a ghost, a legend, a myth wrapped in ruthless business deals and rumors of a family so dysfunctional that wealth was the only thing holding it together. "You're selling me," Scarlett whispered. "We're securing your future," Luna corrected sharply. "And ours. Mr. Gray has agreed to settle all of our debts and invest in the Blackwood shipping line. In return, you will become his wife." "I don't even know him." Malcolm finally looked at her, and the coldness in his eyes made her blood freeze. "You lost the right to have preferences when you lost your usefulness to this family, Scarlett. You cannot provide heirs. You cannot secure advantageous alliances through your own marriage prospects. The only value you have left is in this arrangement." "Do I have a choice?" The question came out as barely a whisper. "No," Malcolm said simply, "you don't." The room spun. Scarlett gripped the edge of the desk, trying to breathe, trying to think, trying to understand how her life had become a transaction. "The wedding is in 3 weeks, Luna added, already standing, already moving on. "We've hired a planner. Everything will be perfect." Perfect? The word tasted like poison. That night, Scarlett stood at her bedroom window, looking out at the manicured garden she'd played in as a child. Somewhere in this city was a man named Silas Gray, a man who'd purchased her like merchandise, a man who would become her husband without ever having met her. She touched the glass, her reflection staring back at her, pale skin, dark hair, haunted eyes. "I'm not useless," she whispered to her own image. "I'm not." But in the silence of her room, surrounded by the family that had already erased her, the words felt like lies she told herself to survive. 3 weeks until her life ended. 3 weeks until she discovered it was just beginning. The engagement announcement appeared in the Financial Times before Scarlett even saw the ring. She discovered it over breakfast, the same breakfast table where Elise still sat planning her own wedding, oblivious to the fact that Scarlett's life had been auctioned off 3 days prior. "Oh my God," Elise gasped, her mimosa nearly spilling as she stared at her phone. "Scarlett, is this real?" Luna snatched the phone from her niece's hand, her eyes scanning the screen before a practiced smile curved her lips. "Well, Silas certainly doesn't waste time." The headline read, "Greyindustries Billionaire Silas Grey2 wed Blackwood heiress in private ceremony." Heiress? The word was almost funny. Scarlett was inheriting nothing except a prison sentence with expensive linens. "Let me see," Scarlett said quietly, extending her hand. Luna passed her the phone with barely concealed satisfaction. The article was brief, clinical, the kind of announcement that appeared when business merged with matrimony. There was no photo of Scarlett, no quote about love or destiny, just two names, a date, and the unmistakable scent of a transaction. "You should be grateful," Luna said, retrieving her own phone to begin what would undoubtedly be a day of performative joy for her social circle. Most girls would kill for this opportunity. Most girls hadn't been sold like livestock. Scarlett excused herself from the table, her untouched toast growing cold, her throat too tight to swallow anything anyway. She made it to her bedroom before the first sob broke free, her back pressed against the door as the reality crashed over her in waves. She was getting married in 19 days to a man she'd never met. A man who'd negotiated for her like she was real estate. A man who knew exactly what he was buying, a defective daughter nobody else wanted. The knock came an hour later, after Scarlett had cried herself empty and washed her face until her skin felt raw. "Miss Blackwood," it was Dominic Hale's voice, professional and distant. "May I have a moment?" She found him waiting in the drawing room, his leather portfolio open on the coffee table, documents spread like evidence at a crime scene. "I thought you might want to review the marriage contract," he said without preamble, "since you'll be signing it next week." Scarlett sat, her hands folded in her lap with the kind of stillness she'd learned from years of being invisible. "My parents already agreed to everything." "Nevertheless, you are the bride. You should understand what you're agreeing to." The word agreeing was generous, but Scarlett didn't argue. She leaned forward, scanning the dense legal language that reduced her life to clauses and stipulations. Article 3.2. The bride agrees to maintain public appearances as required for social and business functions. Article 5.1. Separate residences within the primary household are permitted at either party's discretion. Article 7.4. In the event of dissolution, all assets remain with Mr. Gray unless otherwise specified in addendums. "It reads like a business merger," Scarlett observed, her voice hollow. "That's because it is," Dominic replied, not unkindly. "Mr. Gray is a practical man. He believes in clarity." "Has he asked anything about me? What I like, what I think, whether She stopped, the question dying on her tongue. "Never mind." Dominic's expression softened slightly, the first crack in his professional armor. "For what it's worth, Miss Blackwood, Mr. Gray specifically requested that you have your own legal counsel review this contract. Your father declined on your behalf." "Of course he did." "May I ask you something?" Scarlett met the attorney's eyes. "Why did he choose me? There are 1,000 women who would." "I'm not at liberty to discuss Mr. Gray's motivations," Dominic interrupted gently. "But I can tell you that he doesn't make decisions lightly. If he chose you, he had his reasons." The words should have been comforting. Instead, they felt ominous. The wedding planner arrived the next day. A petite woman named Vivian Chen who spoke in exclamation points and treated Scarlett's opinions like optional accessories. "Your mother has exquisite taste," Vivian gushed, spreading fabric samples across the dining table. "She's already selected the color palette, ivory and gold, very classic, very elegant." "I prefer blue," Scarlett said quietly. Vivian blinked. "Oh, well, your mother was quite specific about." "Ivory and gold is fine," Scarlett conceded, too exhausted to fight for something as meaningless as napkin colors. Luna swept into the room, already on her phone, already orchestrating the performance of a lifetime. "We'll need the ceremony at the Cathedral of St. Helena. I've already spoken to the bishop. Guest list is at 400 and climbing." 400, Scarlett repeated. "I thought this was supposed to be private." "Private for the Financial Times, darling, not for society. This is the event of the season." Luna finally looked at her daughter, her gaze assessing. "We'll need to do something about your appearance. You look exhausted." "I am exhausted." "Well, don't be. You're about to become Mrs. Silas Gray. Start acting like it." The fittings came next. An endless parade of designers and seamstresses who pinned and tucked and discussed Scarlett's body like she wasn't standing right there. "She's quite thin," one murmured. "We'll need to add structure to the bodice." "The neckline should be higher," another suggested. "More conservative, Mr. Gray appreciates elegance." Scarlett stood on the platform in her underwear, arms extended, while strangers debated the best way to package her. Through the mirror, she caught her own reflection, pale, hollow-eyed, disappearing even as they tried to dress her up. This is what being sold looks like, she thought. This civilized brutality. The engagement party happened on a Saturday night at the Blackwood Mansion, a glittering affair with champagne fountains and a string quartet and 200 people who'd come to witness the spectacle. Scarlett wore the dress her mother had chosen, ivory silk, that cost more than most people's cars, and stood beside her parents as they received guests. "Such a beautiful bride," people cooed, air-kissing her cheeks. "What a catch," others whispered, their envy barely masked. "Lucky girl," they all agreed. Lucky, the word followed her through the evening like a ghost. Silas Gray didn't attend his own engagement party. "Business in Singapore," Malcolm explained smoothly when guests inquired. "He sends his regrets." His regrets, not his apologies, not his promises to make it up to her. Just regrets, formal and distant, exactly what you'd expect from a man who'd purchased his bride through a lawyer. Scarlett smiled through the evening, her face aching from the performance. She accepted congratulations from people who'd ignored her for months. She posed for photographs that would be published in society pages, proof that the defective Blackwood daughter had somehow landed on her feet. When Elise cornered her near the champagne fountain, her expression was equal parts curiosity and pity. "Have you even spoken to him?" Elise asked. "Your fiancé?" "No." "Aren't you terrified?" Scarlett looked at her cousin, this girl who'd stolen her mother's affection simply by being fertile, and felt something cold settle in her chest. "I'm not terrified of Silas Gray," she said quietly. "I'm terrified of what my parents turned me into, a commodity, a bargaining chip, something to be traded when the bills come due." Elise's eyes widened. "Scarlett, I didn't." "It's fine," Scarlett interrupted, her voice smooth as glass. "Enjoy your spring wedding, Elise. I'm sure it'll be beautiful." She walked away before her cousin could respond, moving through the crowd like a ghost at her own funeral. That night, alone in her bedroom, Scarlett allowed herself to break. She sat on the floor of her closet, still wearing the ivory dress, and cried until there were no tears left. She cried for the girl she'd been, the daughter who'd believed her parents loved her. She cried for the future she'd imagined, one where she chose her own path, her own partner, her own life. But most of all, she cried for the woman she was being forced to become. A wife without love. A bride without choice. A person without value, beyond what she could provide to men who saw her as a solution to their problems. When the tears finally stopped, Scarlett stood and looked at herself in the mirror. Her makeup was ruined, her hair disheveled, her eyes red and swollen. "You will survive this," she whispered to her reflection. "You will survive him." She didn't know if she believed it. But she had no choice except to try. The wedding day arrived like an execution date. Scarlett stood in the bridal suite of the Cathedral of St. Helena, surrounded by attendants fussing over her dress, her veil, her makeup. Everything was perfect. Everything was planned. Everything felt like a nightmare dressed in lace. "It's time," Vivian announced, her smile bright and oblivious. Scarlett's hands trembled as she picked up the bouquet, white roses and orchids, flowers she'd never chosen, flowers that meant nothing to her. The cathedral doors opened. 400 faces turned to stare. And at the end of the impossibly long aisle stood a man she'd never met, tall, dark-haired, his expression unreadable from this distance. Silas Gray. Her future. Her prison. Malcolm appeared at her side, offering his arm with the same expression he wore when closing business deals. Ready. No, she would never be ready. But she took his arm anyway, because she had no choice, because this was always how the story was going to end. The wedding march began. With each step down the aisle, Scarlett felt her old life falling away. The daughter, the disappointment, the defective girl nobody wanted, all of it dissolving with every footfall. By the time she reached the altar and her father placed her hand in Sela's graze, Scarlett understood the truth. Her life had just been officially transferred. She was no longer a Blackwood. She was property. And the man whose hand now held hers hadn't even looked her in the eyes yet. Sela's Gray's hand was cold. That was Scarlett's first thought as she stood at the altar, her trembling fingers enclosed in his palm. Not warm, not reassuring, just cold, like marble, like metal, like everything about this transaction pretending to be a wedding. She forced herself to look up at him. He was handsome in the way powerful men often were, sharp jawline, dark hair cut precisely, eyes so dark they were almost black. But it was his expression that made Scarlett's breath catch. Not cruel, not kind, just absent, like he was standing at a board meeting, not his own wedding. The priest began speaking, words about love and commitment and holy matrimony that felt obscene in their irony. Do you, Silas Montgomery Gray, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. His voice was deep, flat, clinical, like signing a contract. Scarlett's vision blurred at the edges. 400 people watched, waiting for her response, waiting for her to complete the performance. Do you, Scarlett Marie Blackwood, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? She opened her mouth. No sound came out. Silas's fingers tightened slightly around hers, not painful, just present. A reminder, an instruction. I do, Scarlett whispered. The priest smiled. You may kiss the bride. This was it. The moment when he would claim her, when the transaction would be sealed with some facsimile of intimacy. Silas turned to face her fully, his expression still unreadable. He lifted her veil with one hand, the movement precise and impersonal. Then he leaned down and pressed his lips to her forehead. Not her mouth, her forehead. Like a blessing, like a promise, like something Scarlett couldn't begin to understand. The congregation erupted in polite applause, oblivious to the strangeness of what had just happened. But Scarlett felt it, the deliberate choice, the message in that single gesture. I will not take what you do not offer. Or maybe she was reading meaning into nothing. Maybe he simply found her too repulsive to kiss properly. The reception was a blur of champagne toasts and forced smiles and her mother's triumphant expression as she accepted congratulations from society's elite. Scarlett sat at the head table, Silas beside her, both of them silent while the party raged around them. He didn't touch her, didn't speak to her, didn't even look at her. They cut the cake for the photographers, his hand over hers on the knife. Another performance, another lie. When tradition dictated they feed each other a bite, he did so with the same mechanical precision he'd shown throughout the ceremony. You should eat something, he said quietly, the first words he'd spoken directly to her. You look pale. I'm fine, Scarlett replied automatically. You're trembling. She hadn't realized. Silas signaled a waiter, requesting water and a plate of food Scarlett knew she couldn't swallow. But she appreciated the gesture, however cold its delivery. The first dance came too soon. Scarlett stood, her legs unsteady, as Silas led her to the center of the ballroom. The string quartet began playing something classical and romantic, another layer of irony. His hand settled on her waist, light, impersonal, maintaining exactly the appropriate distance. They moved through the motions of the waltz, two strangers performing intimacy for an audience. You don't have to be afraid of me, Silas said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Scarlett missed a step, stumbling slightly. His grip steadied her instantly. "I'm not afraid," she lied. "You've been terrified since you walked down the aisle. I can feel you shaking." "Can you blame me?" The words came out sharper than she intended. "I was sold to a man I've never met. A man who didn't even bother to meet me before the wedding. A man who did you a favor," Silas interrupted, his tone still infuriatingly calm. "Whether you realize it yet or not." The song ended. Silas released her immediately, stepping back as applause filled the room. Scarlett wanted to scream. She wanted to demand answers, to understand what favor he thought he'd done by purchasing her like merchandise. But there were cameras, guests, her parents watching with their manufactured joy. So she smiled and returned to her seat and counted the minutes until this performance could end. The car ride to Silas's penthouse was silent. Scarlett sat pressed against the door of the limousine, her wedding dress taking up half the back seat, her veil finally removed and lying across her lap like a surrender flag. Silas sat on the opposite side, looking at his phone, his wedding ring already feeling like part of his hand while Scarlett's felt foreign and heavy. The penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower that overlooked the city. Scarlett had seen pictures in architecture magazines, all clean lines and expensive minimalism, more museum than home. A private elevator brought them directly into the foyer. The doors opened to reveal floor-to-ceiling windows, modern art on white walls, furniture that looked designed rather than lived in. "Your belongings arrived this afternoon," Silas said, shrugging off his jacket. "Your room is on the 2nd floor, 3rd door on the left." Scarlett blinked. "My room?" "Yes." "We're not," she couldn't finish the sentence. "Sharing a bedroom?" "No." Silas loosened his tie, finally looking directly at her. "I'm not interested in a wife I have to force into my bed, Scarlett. Whatever you're imagining, you can stop." Relief and confusion warred in her chest. "Then why did you marry me?" "Because we need to talk," he said, "and you can't run away from this conversation in a wedding dress. Come." He walked toward what appeared to be a study, not bothering to check if she followed. After a moment's hesitation, Scarlett gathered her skirts and trailed after him, her heels clicking on marble floors. The study was smaller than the rest of the penthouse, lined with books and dominated by a massive desk. Silas poured 2 glasses of whiskey, offering one to Scarlett. "I don't drink," she said. "You might want to tonight." She took the glass. Silas settled into a leather chair, gesturing for her to sit opposite. Now, away from the performance of the wedding, Scarlett could really look at him. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 35, though the sharpness in his eyes made him seem older. There was a scar along his left temple, barely visible, and his hands bore the calluses of someone who'd worked for his wealth rather than inherited it. "I didn't marry you for love," Silas said without preamble. "I assume you figured that out." "Obviously," Scarlett replied, finding her voice. "You married me because my father offered me as payment for his debts." "No, I married you because you're infertile." The word hit like a slap. Scarlett's fingers tightened around the glass. "I'm aware that I'm defective. You don't need to." "You're not defective," Silas interrupted sharply. "You're protected, and so am I now that we're married." Scarlett stared at him. "I don't understand." Silas took a long drink of his whiskey, his expression hardening. "My family doesn't believe in natural inheritance. They believe in taking what they want. In the last 20 years, 3 of my cousins have died in accidents. 2 aunts have disappeared. My own father was murdered when I was 19, made to look like a heart attack, but I know better." The room felt suddenly colder. "Anyone who can inherit from me becomes a target," Silas continued. "Anyone who could produce an heir gives my family something to eliminate, to control, to use against me. I've watched them destroy everyone around me who represented succession." "So you married me because I can't give you children," Scarlett said slowly, the pieces clicking into place. Because an infertile wife removes that weapon. Exactly, Silas leaned forward. You protect me from my own bloodline, and in return I protect you from your parents' cruelty. By purchasing me like property. By removing you from a family that saw you as disposable. His voice was hard. Do you think your father would have stopped at selling you once? If this marriage hadn't happened, he would have found another way to monetize his defective daughter, an affair to blackmail someone, a scandal to manipulate. Your parents don't love you, Scarlett. They proved that the moment they put a price tag on your head. The truth in his words hurt more than the whiskey burning down her throat. Why tell me this? Scarlett asked. You could have just kept me in the dark. Because I don't want a victim, Silas said. I want a partner, someone who understands exactly what this marriage is and isn't, someone who can navigate society beside me without illusions of romance getting in the way. How practical of you. Practicality keeps people alive. He studied her for a long moment. Your parents sold you because they saw weakness. A daughter who couldn't breed, couldn't contribute, couldn't serve their ambitions. They looked at you and saw a liability. Scarlett looked away, blinking back tears she refused to let fall. But I looked at you, Silas continued quietly, and saw something they missed entirely. She forced herself to meet his eyes. What? Survival, he said. You survived 19 years with parents who measured your worth in utility. You survived being reduced to a transaction. You survived standing at that altar today without breaking, even though I could see you wanted to run. That kind of strength doesn't come from being loved, Scarlett. It comes from being underestimated. Something shifted in Scarlett's chest. Not trust, they were too far from that, but recognition maybe, understanding. I'm still a prisoner here, she said. No, you're a partner in a strategic alliance. There's a difference. Is there? Silas stood, moving to the window that overlooked the glittering city. Your parents sold you because they underestimated you. I chose you because I never would. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning Scarlett couldn't quite parse yet. She stood, her wedding dress suddenly feeling less like a costume and more like armor. I'm going to my room now, she said. Third door on the left, Silas reminded her, not turning from the window. Scarlett made it to the doorway before she stopped. Silas. Yes. Thank you for the forehead kiss, for not. She couldn't finish. I'm not a good man, Scarlett, he said quietly. But I'm not a monster. Get some rest. We have a lot of work to do. As Scarlett climbed the stairs to her new room, she realized something surprising. For the first time in 6 months, she didn't feel worthless. She felt dangerous. And somehow, that made all the difference. Scarlett woke in her new bedroom to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows she'd been too exhausted to close the night before. For a disorienting moment, she forgot where she was, forgot the wedding, the vows, the cold hand in hers at the altar. Then she saw the wedding dress draped over a chair like a ghost, and everything came rushing back. She was married. She was Mrs. Silas Gray. She was in a penthouse that felt more like a beautiful cage than a home. A knock at the door made her sit up, pulling the covers to her chest. Yes. Breakfast is ready, Mrs. Gray. A woman's voice, professional and neutral. Mr. Gray is already in the dining room. Mrs. Gray, the name felt like someone else's. Scarlett dressed quickly in clothes that had been unpacked for her, simple black pants and a silk blouse that she'd owned for years, but never had occasion to wear. Her mother had always preferred her in pastels, in soft colors that made her fade into the background. But Scarlett didn't want to fade anymore. The dining room was all glass and chrome, a table set for two with breakfast that looked catered rather than cooked. Silas sat at one end, reading a tablet, coffee at his elbow. He looked up when she entered, his expression unreadable. You slept well. Well enough, Scarlett lied, taking the seat across from him. In truth, she'd barely slept at all, her mind racing with everything he'd told her about his family, about why he'd married her, about partnerships and survival. Good, Silas slid a key card across the table. That's for the elevator, the building, and the car service. You're free to come and go as you please. Scarlett stared at the card. I'm not a prisoner then. I told you last night you're a partner. Partners don't imprison each other. He returned to his tablet. Though I would appreciate discretion. The media will be interested in us for a while. Try not to give them ammunition. I'll try not to embarrass you, Scarlett said dryly. I'm not worried about embarrassment. I'm worried about your safety. Silas set down the tablet, fixing her with those dark, intense eyes. My family may not target you directly since you can't produce heirs, but they're not above using you to get to me. Until they accept this marriage as permanent, you need to be careful. The reminder that she'd married into a family of killers made Scarlett's coffee taste like ash. What am I supposed to do all day? She asked. Sit here and be decorative. What do you want to do? The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in months, maybe years. Scarlett hesitated. I used to be good with numbers, financial analysis. My father never let me near the business, but I'd read his reports, try to understand the patterns. Something shifted in Silas's expression. You studied finance. Informally, books, online courses, whatever I could access without him noticing. She felt suddenly self-conscious. It was just a hobby. Nothing is just a hobby if you're good at it. Silas stood, gesturing for her to follow. Come with me. He led her to a home office she hadn't seen the night before, smaller than his study, with a desk, computer, and windows overlooking the city. On the desk sat a stack of folders and reports. These are summaries of my current holdings, Silas said. 15 companies across 6 industries. I acquire failing businesses, restructure them, and make them profitable. Some I keep, some I sell. Scarlett approached the desk cautiously, her fingers itching to open the folders. Why are you showing me this? Because you said you wanted something to do. Because I'm curious if your hobby translates to actual skill. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her. And because if we're going to be partners, I need to know what you're capable of beyond surviving your parents. It felt like a test. Maybe it was. Scarlett opened the first folder. She didn't emerge from the office until early afternoon. The reports were fascinating: companies on the brink of collapse, acquisition strategies, restructuring plans. Silas's business model was aggressive but brilliant. Buy low, identify the core problem, fix it ruthlessly, then either hold or sell high. But as Scarlett dug deeper, she started noticing things. Inefficiencies in the supply chain of his manufacturing division, redundant management positions in the tech acquisition, and in one company, a shipping firm called Meridian Logistics, numbers that didn't quite add up. She was cross-referencing the third quarter reports when Silas appeared in the doorway with 2 sandwiches. You missed lunch, he said, setting a plate beside her. There's fraud in Meridian Logistics, Scarlett replied without looking up. Silas went very still. Explain. The reported shipping volumes don't match the fuel consumption. Either they're running empty containers to inflate numbers, or someone's cooking the books to hide theft. She pulled up a spreadsheet she'd created, color-coded discrepancies highlighted in red. It's subtle, spread across multiple quarters, but it's there. Silas moved to stand behind her, studying the screen. The silence stretched so long Scarlett began to worry she'd made a mistake, seen patterns that didn't exist, embarrassed herself by playing at something she didn't truly understand. How long did it take you to find this? Silas asked finally. About 2 hours once I noticed the fuel discrepancy. My auditors missed it. Your auditors were probably looking at each quarter independently. The pattern only emerges when you map it over 18 months. Scarlett finally turned to look at him. Did I? Is this wrong? No. Silas's expression was something between impressed and unsettled. It's exactly right. I've had suspicions about Meridian's CEO for months, but I couldn't prove it. You just handed me the evidence in an afternoon. Pride bloomed warm in Scarlett's chest, unfamiliar, almost painful. What else did you find? Silas asked. Over the next hour, Scarlett walked him through everything she'd observed. The supply chain inefficiencies, the redundant positions, a marketing budget that seemed inflated compared to industry standards. But she also found opportunities. Your tech acquisition, Nexus Solutions, they're underutilizing their patent portfolio, Scarlett explained, pulling up another file. They have AI algorithms they developed 3 years ago that never made it to market. With minimal investment, you could license these to your other companies. Create synergy between your holdings instead of running them as separate entities. Silas sat down, really looking at her for the first time since she'd started talking. That would require restructuring multiple companies simultaneously, coordinating across divisions. Yes, it would also increase efficiency by an estimated 30% and create competitive advantages your rivals couldn't replicate. Scarlett felt her confidence growing with each word. You don't just want profitable companies, Mr. Gray. You want an empire that's greater than the sum of its parts. Silas, he corrected quietly. We're married. You can use my name. Silas, she repeated, the name feeling strange on her tongue. He stood, packing to the window, his hands in his pockets. Where did you learn this? Books, online courses, observation, Scarlett shrugged. My father used to leave his work scattered around his study. I'd read everything when he wasn't there. Try to understand why he made the decisions he did, where I would have done things differently. Did he know? No, he wouldn't have cared if he did. Daughters weren't supposed to understand business. We were supposed to marry well and produce heirs. The bitterness leaked into her voice despite her best efforts. Silas turned to face her. You're better than him. What? Your father, Malcolm Blackwood. You're a better strategist than he ever was. He inherited wealth and squandered it through ego and poor decisions. You see patterns he'd miss. You think 3 moves ahead while he's still reacting to the current crisis. Scarlett's throat tightened. You don't know that. I know he was desperate enough to sell his daughter to cover his debts. I know that every financial decision I've seen from him has been reactive, short-sighted, driven by pride instead of logic. Silas moved closer, his gaze intense. And I know that in 4 hours, you identified problems and solutions my paid consultants have been missing for months. I just got lucky. Stop. The command was gentle but firm. Stop diminishing yourself. It's what they trained you to do, but you don't have to do it here. Scarlett looked down at her hands, at the wedding ring that still felt foreign. I don't know how to be anything else. Then learn. Silas pulled up a chair beside her, sitting so they were eye level. I have a proposition. Another contract. Scarlett managed a weak smile. A job, work with me. Review my companies, identify inefficiencies, propose solutions. I'll pay you consultant rates deposited into your own account, not ours. Your money. You don't have to. I'm not doing you a favor, Scarlett. I'm recognizing an asset I didn't know I was acquiring. His expression was serious. In business, when you find unexpected value, you capitalize on it. You're brilliant at this. Stop hiding it. The word brilliant made something crack inside her chest. When was the last time someone had called her brilliant? Had anyone ever? What if I fail? She whispered. Then you fail, but I don't think you will. Silas stood, offering his hand. So, partners. Scarlett looked at his extended hand, remembering the cold grip at the altar, the impersonal touch during their first dance. But this felt different. This was a choice, not a transaction. She took his hand. Partners. His grip was firmer now, warmer. Good. Start with Meridian Logistics. I want a full report on the fraud by Friday. That's 3 days. Is that a problem? Scarlett felt something she hadn't felt in months. Excitement. Challenge, purpose. No, she said, it's not a problem. The next 3 days passed in a blur of spreadsheets and analysis. Scarlett commandeered the office, covering the walls with charts and timelines. She ordered takeout and forgot to eat it. She worked until her eyes burned and then worked longer. And for the first time since her diagnosis, she felt alive. Silas would check in periodically, asking questions, challenging her conclusions, pushing her to think deeper. He never condescended, never doubted. He treated her like a colleague, like someone whose opinion mattered. On Friday afternoon, Scarlett finished her report. She found Silas in his study, on a conference call that sounded tense. He glanced up when she entered, saw the bound document in her hands, and immediately ended the call. "You finished." "I finished." Scarlett set the report on his desk. "The CEO of Meridian Logistics has been siphoning approximately $700,000 annually for the past 3 years. I've traced the money to shell companies in the Caymans. I've also identified his 3 accomplices and documented every transaction." Silas opened the report, scanning the executive summary. His eyebrows rose incrementally with each page. He looked up at her. "Scarlett, this is prosecutor-level evidence. How did you?" "I cross-referenced shipping manifests with port authority records. Public information, just tedious to compile. The pattern was obvious once I had the data organized." She pointed to a chart. "I've also included recommendations for restructuring Meridian's management and implementing oversight systems to prevent future fraud." Silas set down the report carefully, like it was something precious. "I'm going to fire my entire audit team." "You should probably keep them. They're good at compliance. They just need someone to tell them where to look." "Someone like you." Scarlett smiled despite herself. "Maybe." Silas stood, rounding the desk until he was standing directly in front of her. The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Do you understand what you just did?" he asked quietly. "I identified fraud. You saved me millions. You handed me leverage I didn't have. You proved that the woman everyone dismissed as defective is sharper than people they pay 6 figures to do this work." He shook his head slowly. "Scarlett, you don't belong behind anyone's shadow." The words hit her like a revelation, like permission, like freedom. She'd spent her whole life being invisible, being dismissed, being small. But maybe she didn't have to be anymore. "Thank you," Scarlett whispered. "Don't thank me. You did this." Silas returned to his desk, already pulling up contacts. "Now let me introduce you to what happens when you're brilliant and people actually pay attention." As he began making calls about Meridian Logistics, referencing her report, speaking her name with respect, Scarlett felt something shift inside her. She wasn't defective. She wasn't worthless. She was just finally being seen. Meyer Levance had kind eyes. That was what Scarlett noticed first when the housekeeper introduced herself 3 weeks into the marriage. Warm brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled. The sort of maternal warmth Scarlett had always craved but never received from Luna. "Mr. Gray thought you might like some help settling in," Meyerla said, her accent carrying hints of Eastern Europe. "I've been with the household staff for 6 months. If you need anything at all, you just ask." Scarlett had been grateful. The penthouse was vast and sterile, and having someone who seemed genuinely kind felt like a lifeline in an ocean of cold glass and chrome. Meyerla brought her tea in the mornings, asked about her day, listened when Scarlett talked about the work she was doing for Silas, nodding encouragingly even when the financial details must have been incomprehensible. It felt like having a friend. That should have been Scarlett's first warning. The suspicion started small. Scarlett had left a draft report on her desk, preliminary findings about inefficiencies in Silas's pharmaceutical acquisition. When she returned from lunch, the papers were in a slightly different position. Not enough to be certain, just enough to make her pause. She told herself she was being paranoid. Then it happened again. Files reorganized. Her laptop angled differently than she'd left it. Small things, easy to dismiss individually but forming a pattern she couldn't ignore. Scarlett began testing her suspicions. She'd place a hair across her closed laptop before leaving the room. It was always disturbed when she returned. She'd leave documents in specific positions. They'd shift. Someone was going through her work. And there was only one person with consistent access to her office. "I think someone's been reading my files," Scarlett told Silas one evening over dinner. They'd fallen into a routine, working separately during the day, then sharing a meal in the evening where they discussed business like colleagues rather than spouses. It was comfortable if strange. More partnership than marriage. Silas set down his fork. "Explain." Scarlett described the small discrepancies, the feeling of invasion. "I sound paranoid, don't I?" "No, you sound observant." Silas pulled out his phone, typing something quickly. "I'll have security review the footage. We have cameras in the penthouse. In common areas, not bedrooms or bathrooms. Privacy matters, but so does security." He studied her carefully. "Do you have a suspect?" Scarlett hesitated. "Myrla has access to my office. She brings me tea, tidies up, but she's been so kind I can't imagine." "The best spies always are," Silas interrupted gently. "Don't dismiss your instincts because someone smiles at you, Scarlett. That's how people get manipulated." The words stung because they were true. The security footage confirmed it. Scarlett watched on Silas's laptop as Myrla entered her office during lunch, carefully photographing documents with her phone. The woman worked quickly, efficiently, clearly practiced at this. "How long has she been doing this?" Scarlett asked, her voice hollow. "Since she was hired 6 months ago." Silas fast-forwarded through other clips, Myrla going through his study, photographing correspondence, accessing files on his computer when he was away. "She's good, professional. This isn't amateur spying." "Who hired her?" Silas pulled up another file. "Officially, she came through a staffing agency, but I had my people dig deeper tonight. The agency's owned by a shell company. The shell company's owned by—" "Malcolm Blackwood," Scarlett finished, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. Her father had planted a spy in her new home. Her father was still watching her, controlling her, treating her like an asset to be monitored even after selling her off. "I'm sorry," Silas said quietly. "I should have vetted the staff more carefully before you arrived." "This isn't your fault." Scarlett's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs, willing the trembling to stop. "What do? We give her exactly what your father wants to see." Silas's expression turned calculating. "She's been useful, actually. Every report she sends confirms Malcolm thinks you're just a decorative wife, not a strategic partner. Let's keep it that way. You want to feed him false information. I want to make him underestimate us until we're ready to strike." Silas closed the laptop. "But first, I need to know, are you ready to accept that your father sees you as an asset to exploit, not a daughter to protect?" Scarlett thought about the medical report slammed on the marble table, the cold negotiations where she wasn't even present, the wedding where she was transferred like property. "I already knew that," she whispered. "I just didn't want to believe it." That night Scarlett couldn't sleep. She lay in her too-large bed, staring at the ceiling, memories flooding back with the clarity of broken glass. Age 7, her father's study, where she'd accidentally knocked over an expensive vase. "Do you know how much that cost, Scarlett? More than you're worth." He'd been joking. She thought he'd been joking. Age 12, overhearing her parents discuss her cousin Elise. "At least Victoria raised a daughter with marketable qualities," Malcolm had said. "Pretty, charming, fertile." "Scarlett's still young," Luna had replied. "She might improve." Improve, like she was a stock portfolio yielding disappointing returns. Age 15, when she'd won a mathematics competition and come home excited to share the news. "That's nice, dear," Luna had said without looking up from her phone. "But try not to be too smart in public. Men don't like women who show off." "Mother, I wasn't showing off, I was." "Scarlett, enough. Your value isn't in equations, it's in who you marry." Age 17, watching her father negotiate a business deal, realizing he used the same cold calculation when discussing her future marriage prospects. The Sterling boy would be a good match. Decent family, strong connections. We should cultivate that. Cultivate like planting crops, like breeding livestock. Every memory reframed itself with this new understanding. Every interaction revealed its transactional nature. Her parents hadn't been preparing her for life. They'd been preparing her for sale. And when she'd become unsellable due to infertility, they'd simply found another buyer willing to take damaged goods at a discount. Scarlett pressed her face into her pillow and finally let herself cry. Not for the parents she'd lost. She was beginning to understand she'd never really had them. But for the daughter she'd been, desperate for love that was never coming, trying to earn affection that was never available, measuring her worth against standards designed to ensure she'd always fail. The confrontation happened accidentally. Scarlett had gone to collect some documents from her childhood home, financial records she needed for a report. Her mother had insisted it was fine to stop by, that they missed her, that she should visit more often. More lies, more performance. She used her key, entering the mansion that had once felt like a palace and now felt like a mausoleum. Voices drifted from her father's study. "Confirmed she's working on Gray's companies," Myrla's voice said. "But it's just busy work, reviewing reports, nothing strategic." Scarlett froze in the hallway. "Good," Malcolm's voice, pleased and smug. "Silas is keeping her occupied but out of the way, smart man." "She seems happy though," Myrla continued, more confident. "Confidence is fine as long as it doesn't translate to independence." Malcolm paused. "Keep monitoring. If she becomes useful to Gray in any meaningful way, I want to know. There might be value in that." "Value, always value." Scarlett's hand tightened on the doorframe. "And if Gray discovers she's being watched?" Myrla asked. "He won't. He thinks he got a broken bird to keep his family off his back. He's not looking for corporate espionage from his defective wife's father." Malcolm laughed, the sound making Scarlett's stomach turn. "Besides, even if he did find out, what's he going to do? She's still my daughter. I still have rights." "Rights?" Luna's voice sharp with amusement. "Malcolm, you sold those when you signed her over. She's Gray's problem now." "She's always been a problem," Malcolm replied. "At least now she's expensive enough that he'll keep her locked away properly." The words should have hurt. Instead, they crystallized something in Scarlett's chest, cold and clear and absolutely certain. She stepped into the doorway. Three faces turned toward her: Malcolm's surprise, Luna's alarm, Myrla's genuine shock that looked almost like guilt. "Scarlett," Malcolm recovered quickly, his expression smoothing into something paternal and false. "Darling, we didn't expect you. Is everything all right?" Scarlett looked at each of them in turn. The father who'd measured her worth in transactions, the mother who'd traded affection for utility, the spy who'd weaponized kindness. "I came for some files," she said calmly, "but I think I found something more valuable instead." "I don't understand," Malcolm began. "Clarity," Scarlett interrupted. "I found clarity." She pulled out her phone, stopping the recording she'd started the moment she heard Myrla's voice. "Thank you, Father, for finally being honest about what I was to you." Malcolm's face went pale. "Scarlett, you don't understand the context." "I understand perfectly." She looked at Myrla. "You can tell my husband you've been compromised. I'm sure he'll be in touch about your termination and the lawsuit." Myrla opened her mouth, then closed it, defeated. "And Father," Scarlett turned back to her parents, You can stop pretending you care. We both know you never did. I was never your daughter." "That's not true," Luna said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it?" Scarlett's voice remained steady, detached, like she was analyzing a balance sheet. "You measured my value from birth, calculated my worth based on marriage potential and reproductive capacity. When I failed to meet your standards, you liquidated me like an underperforming asset." "We gave you everything," Malcolm said, anger creeping into his tone. "You gave me shelter and food and education, the same things you'd give a show dog you were breeding for profit." Scarlett moved toward the desk, collecting the files she'd come for. "The difference is, you'd probably show more affection to the dog." "You ungrateful." "Ungrateful?" Scarlett laughed, the sound bitter. "For what? For selling me, for planting a spy in my home, for treating me like an investment that failed to yield returns." She headed for the door, then paused, looking back one last time at the people who'd given her life but never love. "I was never their daughter," she whispered, finally understanding the truth that had been there all along. "I was their investment." And with that realization came something unexpected. Not devastation. Freedom. She walked out of the mansion and didn't look back. "You want me to do what?" Scarlett stared at Silas across his desk, certain she'd misheard. "Go back," Silas repeated calmly. "Call your mother, apologize for your outburst. Tell her you've been emotional stressed, that marriage has been harder than you expected. After everything they've done." "Because of everything they've done." Silas leaned forward, his expression intense. "Your father thinks he still controls you. Let him keep thinking that while we build a case that destroys him." Scarlett's hands trembled with anger. "I can't pretend to forgive them." "You don't have to forgive. You just have to perform." Silas pulled up a file on his computer. "Myrla's been feeding Malcolm information for 6 months. Now we feed him what we want him to know. We make him believe you're unhappy, that the marriage is failing, that you're vulnerable to manipulation." "Why would he care if I'm unhappy?" "Because unhappy wives are useful. They create leverage." Silas turned the screen toward her, showing financial records. "Malcolm's debts didn't disappear when we married. I paid off his immediate creditors, but he's still hemorrhaging money. He needs another solution, and a desperate daughter is an exploitable asset." Scarlett studied the numbers, her analytical mind engaging despite her emotional resistance. "You think he'll try to use me against you?" "I know he will, and when he does, we'll have everything documented." Silas closed the laptop. "But only if you're willing to play the role." She thought about her father's voice in the study. "She's still my daughter. I still have rights." "What exactly do you need me to do?" The call to Luna came 3 days later, after Scarlett had rehearsed the performance until it felt almost real. "Mother," she let her voice crack slightly, I need to talk to someone." Luna's response was cautious. "Scarlett, I wasn't sure you'd call after your display last week." "I'm sorry about that. I was upset and I said things I didn't mean." The lies tasted like poison, but Scarlett pushed forward. "Marriage has been harder than I expected. Silas is. He's cold, distant. I feel so alone here." A pause. Then Luna's voice softened with something that might have been genuine concern if Scarlett didn't know better. "Oh, darling, I worried this might happen. These business marriages are so difficult." "I don't know what to do." Scarlett paced her bedroom, where Silas had assured her there were no recording devices. The irony of trusting her husband over her parents wasn't lost on her. "He treats me like an employee, not a wife. I thought. I don't know what I thought." "Why don't you come for lunch tomorrow?" Luna suggested. "Just us. We can talk properly." "I'd like that," Scarlett whispered. "I miss home." The word home nearly choked her, but it had the desired effect. "Tomorrow at 1, Luna said warmly. "Everything will be all right, sweetheart. Trust your mother." Scarlett ended the call and found Silas standing in her doorway. "That was convincing," he said. "It felt disgusting. Good performances usually do." He entered the room, handing her a small device the size of a button. "Wear this tomorrow. It's a recording device. Get them talking about their plans, their expectations, anything we can use." Scarlett took the device, its weight insignificant but its implications massive. "I've never done anything like this before." You confronted a room full of people at the charity gala about fraud. You exposed Myrla without hesitation. "You're stronger than you think, Scarlett." "That was about business. This is family." "No," Silas corrected gently. "They stopped being your family when they put a price on your head. This is just business with people who share your DNA." The words should have hurt. Instead, they steadied her. Lunch at the Blackwood Mansion was a masterclass in performance. Luna had prepared Scarlett's favorite dishes from childhood, another manipulation, triggering nostalgia for a past that had never been as warm as memory suggested. They ate in the conservatory, sunlight streaming through glass walls, everything beautiful and poisonous. "You look thin," Luna observed, studying Scarlett with calculating eyes. "Is he not feeding you properly?" "He's fine, I've just been stressed." Scarlett pushed food around her plate, playing the part of the troubled wife. "I thought marriage would be different, that maybe he'd, I don't know, care." "Men like Silas Gray don't marry for love, darling. Surely you understood that." "I did, I just thought we might at least be friends." Scarlett let genuine emotion bleed into her voice, not about Silas, but about the loneliness of her childhood in this very house. "Instead, I'm just another acquisition he manages from a distance." Luna reached across the table, taking Scarlett's hand in a gesture that would have meant everything 6 months ago. "Have you considered that this marriage might not be permanent?" There it was, the opening. "What do you mean?" Scarlett asked carefully. "Well, you married under duress, didn't you? Your father's financial situation forced the arrangement. A good lawyer could argue coercion." Luna's thumb traced circles on Scarlett's hand, soothing and sinister. "And now that your father's situation has stabilized somewhat, perhaps there are options." "An annulment." Scarlett's voice was small, hopeful, exactly what Luna wanted to hear. "Possibly, though that might be complicated legally." Luna leaned closer, conspiratorial. "But I've been speaking with someone, a doctor who specializes in fertility treatments. Cutting-edge work. He thinks there might be hope for your condition." Scarlett's blood ran cold. Hope. Dr. Adrian Wolfe. "He's had remarkable success with cases like yours. If you could conceive, well," Luna smiled. "That changes everything, doesn't it? Suddenly you have value beyond this loveless marriage. Options. Leverage." The recording device hidden in Scarlett's necklace captured every word. "But Silas married me because I'm infertile," Scarlett said, testing the waters. "He doesn't want children." "Exactly. Which means if you became pregnant, the marriage would be void on his terms. He'd have to release you." Luna squeezed Scarlett's hand. "And your father has been in contact with several interested parties, men who would overlook your previous marriage for the right arrangement." "You want to sell me again?" The words slipped out before Scarlett could stop them. Luna's expression hardened. "We want to give you a better future. Don't be ungrateful." Scarlett forced herself to backtrack. "I'm sorry, this is a lot to process." "Of course it is." Luna's warmth returned, artificial and practiced. "Why don't you meet with Dr. Wolfe? Just a consultation, see what he says. No commitment." "I suppose that couldn't hurt." "Wonderful, I'll arrange it." Luna stood, clearly pleased with how the conversation had gone. "You'll see, darling. Soon you'll be free of this cold marriage and settled somewhere you're truly valued." Valued, the word had never sounded more meaningless. Silas listened to the recording twice, his expression growing darker with each replay. "Dr. Adrian Wolfe," he said, already typing the name into his computer. "Let's see who your mother's miracle worker really is." The search results appeared within minutes. Dr. Wolfe had a practice in Manhattan, testimonials from grateful patients, credentials from reputable institutions. All of it fabricated. "He's a fraud," Silas confirmed, showing Scarlett the background check his security team had compiled. "Real name Adrian Walsh. No medical degree. He runs a clinic that preys on desperate people with false hope and fake treatments. He's been investigated in 3 states but never formally charged." "My mother is sending me to a con artist," Scarlett said flatly. "Your mother is setting up a scam to either extort money or create grounds for annulment." Silas pulled up more files. "If you go through treatments and miraculously become pregnant, it gives Malcolm leverage. Either he blackmails us claiming fraud in the marriage contract, or he uses it to negotiate your release so he can resell you." Scarlett felt sick. They've really thought this through. "They're desperate. Desperate people make elaborate plans." Silas closed his laptop. "The question is, do you want to keep playing along?" Scarlett thought about her father's debts, her mother's calculations, the lifetime of being treated like merchandise. Then she thought about the Meridian Logistics fraud she'd uncovered, the pharmaceutical inefficiencies she'd solved, the respect she'd earned through her own intelligence. "I want to destroy them," she said quietly. "Not with emotion, with evidence, with strategy. The way they destroyed me, but cleaner, more permanent." Silas studied her for a long moment. "Then we do this properly. You go to Dr. Wolf. You document everything, the fake diagnosis, the fraudulent treatments, the payments your mother makes. We trace the money back to Malcolm. He'll think he's winning. Let him think that. Confident opponents make mistakes." Silas pulled out a legal pad, beginning to sketch a timeline. "Meanwhile, I'll have forensic accountants trace every financial connection between Malcolm and Wolf. When we're ready, we'll have evidence of fraud, conspiracy, and attempted contract interference." "That could take weeks." "Good things take time." Silas looked up at her. "Can you maintain the performance that long?" Scarlett thought about all the years she'd pretended to be the daughter her parents wanted. The silent dinners, the fake smiles, the constant performance of being less than she was. "I've been performing my whole life," she said. "At least this time I know the role I'm playing." The next 3 weeks were a carefully orchestrated deception. Scarlett attended appointments with Dr. Wolf, who spoke in vague medical terms about revolutionary treatments and breakthrough therapies. She nodded earnestly, asked innocent questions, and secretly documented every false claim, every fabricated test result, every payment her mother made in cash. "No," Scarlett agreed, feeling something fierce and powerful unfurl in her chest. "I'm not." Silas stood, moving to where she sat surrounded by documents and evidence, the paper trail that would unravel her parents' scheme and her father's remaining credibility. "You are no longer surviving," he said quietly, something like pride in his voice. "You are hunting." The words settled over Scarlett like a coronation. He was right. The prey had become the predator, and her parents had no idea what was coming. The Harper Foundation Charity Gala was the social event of the season. Held in the grand ballroom of the Meridian Hotel, it attracted the city's elite old money mingling with new, politicians networking with investors, society columnists cataloging every designer gown and whispered scandal. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors. A string orchestra played Vivaldi. Champagne flowed like water. It was the perfect stage for a public execution. Scarlett stood before her mirror, fastening diamond earrings Silas had given her that morning. Not a gift, a tactical choice. "You'll need to look like you belong at the top," he'd said, "not like someone grateful to be there." The gown was midnight blue, custom designed to make her look powerful rather than pretty. Her hair was pulled back severely, emphasizing the sharp intelligence in her eyes rather than softening her features. She looked like what she'd become, a woman who understood exactly how dangerous she was. "Ready?" Silas appeared in her doorway, devastating in a black tuxedo. Scarlett turned to face him. "Is everything in place?" The documents are with my attorney. The media packets will be distributed on your signal. Dr. Wolf has been served with a subpoena and is currently being detained for questioning. Silas's expression was calm, but his eyes held something fierce. Your parents have no idea what's coming. Good. Scarlett picked up her clutch. Inside it, a flash drive containing every piece of evidence they'd collected. Let's go destroy them. The Blackwood family arrived at the gala like royalty. Malcolm and Luna made their entrance to murmured admiration, her mother's emerald gown catching light like money made visible. They worked the room with practiced ease, Malcolm's recent financial troubles hidden behind expensive tailoring and confident laughter. Scarlett and Silas entered separately, as planned. Let her parents think they were still playing separate games. Scarlett, Luna's voice rang out warm and public. Darling, you look lovely. Doesn't she look lovely, Malcolm? Beautiful, her father agreed, kissing her cheek with performative affection. To the watching crowd, they were the picture of a loving family. How are the treatments going? Dr. Wolf said you've been responding wonderfully. Scarlett smiled, the expression not reaching her eyes. We should discuss that actually, perhaps somewhere more private. Nonsense, Malcolm said jovially. We're among friends. Besides, we have wonderful news to share soon, don't we? He was doing it, actually going through with the public manipulation Silas had predicted. Luna took Scarlett's arm, steering her toward a cluster of society matrons. We're so hopeful about Dr. Wolf's treatments. Fertility medicine has come so far. It's truly miraculous what's possible now. The matrons cooed sympathetically, their eyes bright with gossip. A Blackwood daughter, infertile but now possibly cured. The story would fuel conversations for months. Of course, it's early days, Luna continued, but if Scarlett could conceive, well, it changes everything about her future, doesn't it? There it was, the public setup. If Scarlett became pregnant, it would void her marriage to Silas on the grounds that he'd married her specifically for her infertility. Malcolm would swoop in with lawyers, claiming fraud, demanding annulment and compensation. Then Scarlett would be free to be sold again, this time to the highest bidder among her father's desperate business contacts. Elegant, cruel, exactly what she'd expected. Across the room, Silas caught her eye. He stood with a group of investors looking bored by their conversation, but when their eyes met, he gave the smallest nod. It was time. Scarlett excused herself from the matrons and made her way to the small stage where the charity's director was preparing to give opening remarks. She caught the woman's attention, whispering something that made her eyebrows rise. "Are you certain?" the director asked. "Completely," Scarlett replied. "I have important information about fraud that affects several people in this room. They deserve to know." The director hesitated, then nodded. Scandal was scandal, and stopping it publicly would make her a hero. "Ladies and gentlemen," the director announced, her voice cutting through the cocktail chatter. "We have an unexpected speaker this evening. Mrs. Scarlett Gray has asked to address you all before we begin our formal program." The room fell silent. Hundreds of faces turned toward the stage. Scarlett climbed the steps, her heels clicking against wood, her heart pounding but her hands steady. She reached the microphone and looked out at the sea of New York's elite. Her parents stood near the front, Malcolm's expression confused, Luna's alarmed. "Perfect. Good evening," Scarlett began, her voice amplified through the ballroom. "I apologize for the interruption, but I have information that many of you need to hear. Information about fraud, manipulation, and a scheme designed to exploit desperate people." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Phones appeared recording. This was too good to miss. "6 months ago, I was diagnosed as infertile," Scarlett continued, her voice steady despite the enormity of what she was doing. "My parents, Malcolm and Luna Blackwood, decided this made me worthless. When my father's business empire began collapsing under the weight of his poor decisions and mounting debts, he found a solution. He sold me." Gasps, Luna's face went white. Malcolm started moving toward the stage. I was married to Silas Gray in a transaction designed to save the Blackwood name, Scarlett continued, speaking faster now. I had no choice. I had no voice. I was currency in a deal I wasn't even invited to negotiate. Scarlett, this is inappropriate, Malcolm's voice trying to maintain authority. What's inappropriate, father, is what happened next. Scarlett pulled out the flash drive, holding it up for all to see. When my parents realized they could no longer control me directly, they planted a spy in my home. A woman named Myra Vance, hired through a shell company owned by my father, sent to monitor my marriage and report back. Security footage appeared on screens around the ballroom. Myra photographing documents, accessing files, the evidence irrefutable. But surveillance wasn't enough, Scarlett continued. My parents needed a way to reclaim their asset, so my mother introduced me to Dr. Adrian Wolfe, supposedly a fertility specialist who could cure my condition. She nodded to Silas, who pressed a button on his phone. New images appeared on the screens: Dr. Wolfe's fake credentials, his criminal history, the fabricated medical licenses. Dr. Wolfe is not a doctor, Scarlett announced. He's a con artist who preys on desperate people with false hope and fake treatments. My mother paid him $50,000 to provide fraudulent diagnoses and fake treatment protocols. Luna made a small sound, like something breaking. The goal was simple, Scarlett explained, her voice growing stronger. If I could be convinced I was pregnant, my marriage could be annulled on grounds of fraud. Silas married me specifically because I couldn't produce heirs. If I suddenly could, the contract would be void. Then my father could sell me again, this time to one of his business contacts desperate enough to overlook a previously married woman. The ballroom erupted in shocked whispers. Phones captured every moment. This would be on every society blog and news site within the hour. Malcolm finally reached the stage. You ungrateful, delusional girl. I have the bank records, father. Scarlett's voice cut through his rage. Every payment to Myra, every transaction with Dr. Wolfe, every email between you and the men you were negotiating with for my next sale. My husband's attorneys have compiled everything into a comprehensive legal case. She turned back to the crowd, finding her voice, her power, her truth. I was told I was worthless because I couldn't bear children. I was told I should be grateful someone was willing to take me. I was treated like defective merchandise, damaged goods, a liability to be managed. Scarlett's eyes found her parents, holding their gaze. But the only defective thing in this story was your love. The only fraud was your claim to be parents instead of opportunists. How dare you, Luna started. How dare I? Scarlett laughed, the sound sharp and bright. How dare you? You sold your daughter. You spied on her. You conspired to defraud her marriage so you could sell her again. And you did it all while pretending it was for my benefit, for my future, for my own good. She looked out at the crowd, some shocked, some sympathetic, all captivated. I stand here tonight not to seek your pity, but to reclaim my narrative, Scarlett declared. The story you've been told is that Silas Gray rescued poor, infertile Scarlett Blackwood from obscurity, that I should be grateful for his mercy, thankful for his willingness to overlook my defects. Scarlett found Silas in the crowd. He stood perfectly still, his expression unreadable to others but crystal clear to her. Pride, respect, partnership. But that's not what happened, she continued. I was sold, not rescued. I was traded like property, monitored like an asset, and nearly defrauded out of the one relationship in my life built on honesty instead of manipulation. She held up the flash drive again. This contains evidence of conspiracy, fraud, and attempted contract interference. My husband's attorneys are filing criminal complaints tomorrow morning. The evidence has also been provided to the media, because the people in this room who do business with Malcolm Blackwood deserve to know the kind of man he really is. Malcolm's face had gone from red to ashen. Luna swayed slightly, her perfect composure finally cracking. "You've destroyed us," Malcolm whispered. "No, Father, you destroyed yourselves. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it." Scarlett stepped back from the microphone, her hands shaking now that it was done. The ballroom remained silent for 3 heartbeats. Then someone started clapping. A woman in the back, whose daughter had married young to save her father's business. Then another person and another. The applause built like a wave, not universal but powerful. The people who'd been traded, sold, treated as commodities rather than children, they understood. Scarlett descended from the stage on trembling legs. Security was already escorting her parents out, Malcolm arguing loudly while Luna moved in stunned silence. Tomorrow there would be legal consequences. Tonight there was public humiliation. Silas appeared at her side, offering his arm. "That was extraordinary," he said quietly. "I think I'm going to be sick," Scarlett whispered back. "Later, right now, you need to walk out of here like the queen you just became." They moved through the crowd together. People parted, some reaching out to squeeze Scarlett's hand, others whispering support. A reporter tried to shove a microphone in her face, but Silas deflected it smoothly. Outside in the cool night air, Scarlett finally allowed herself to breathe. "I actually did it," she said, half laughing, half crying. "I destroyed them." "You exposed them," Silas corrected. "They destroyed themselves years ago, you just made it visible." Scarlett looked back at the hotel, where the gala continued in chaos, where her parents were being escorted out in disgrace, where the story of the sold daughter who fought back was already becoming legend. "I was sold," she whispered to herself, testing the words now that they were public, "not rescued." "And today," Silas prompted. Scarlett straightened her shoulders, feeling the weight of diamonds and truth and hard-won power. "Today I reclaim myself." The Blackwood mansion looked smaller than Scarlett remembered. She stood at the iron gates 3 weeks after the gala, keys in hand, not the daughter's key she'd once carried, but the owner's key her attorney had provided that morning. The paperwork had been finalized at dawn. Every debt, every mortgage, every loan Malcolm Blackwood had taken against the property now belonged to Scarlett Gray. She owned her childhood prison. "You don't have to do this," Silas said from beside her. He'd offered to come, and Scarlett had surprised herself by accepting. Not because she needed protection, but because after months of partnership, facing this alone felt wrong. "Yes, I do," Scarlett replied, pushing open the gates. "I need to see it finished." The mansion's grandeur remained intact: marble columns, manicured gardens, the fountain where she'd played as a child before she understood she was being groomed for sale. But now she saw it for what it was: a beautiful cage built on debt and desperation, maintained by people who valued appearance over substance. The front door opened before she could knock. Malcolm stood there, and Scarlett barely recognized him. 3 weeks had aged him a decade. His hair had gone grayer, his face gaunt, his expensive suit hanging loose on a frame that had lost weight from stress. Behind him, the mansion looked hollow, paintings missing from walls, furniture gone, the systematic liquidation of assets already underway. "Scarlett," her name came out broken, "please, we need to talk." "We do," Scarlett agreed, stepping inside without waiting for invitation. She owned this house now. She didn't need permission. Luna appeared from the drawing room, and the transformation was even more shocking. Her mother's perfect composure had shattered completely. No makeup covered the sleepless circles under her eyes. Her designer dress was yesterday's, wrinkled from being slept in. She looked at Scarlett with something between hope and terror. "Darling," Luna whispered, "thank God you came." The endearment that Scarlett had craved her entire childhood now meant nothing, less than nothing. "Shall we sit?" Scarlett moved into the drawing room, her drawing room now, and settled into the chair that had always been her father's. The symbolism wasn't lost on any of them. Malcolm and Luna took the sofa like supplicants before a throne. The attorney said you own everything, Malcolm began, his voice shaking. The house, the debts, even the Blackwood shipping shares I had left. They said you purchased it all. I did. Scarlett crossed her legs, the picture of calm. Inside, her heart pounded, but years of practice at hiding emotion served her well. Silas's team acquired your debts from various creditors over the past 2 weeks, quietly, so you wouldn't know to declare bankruptcy first. As of this morning, you owe me approximately $47 million. Luna made a small sound, like something dying. We don't have 47 million, Malcolm said. We don't have anything. The gala destroyed us. Our accounts are frozen pending investigation. Our friends won't return calls. The business contacts I had are gone. His voice broke. We're ruined. Yes, Scarlett said simply, you are. Scarlett, please. Luna leaned forward, tears streaming down her face. Real tears for perhaps the first time in Scarlett's memory. We made mistakes. We were desperate. Your father's business was collapsing and we didn't know what else to do. So you sold your daughter. We thought we were helping you, giving you a better life than we could provide. Malcolm stood abruptly, packing like a caged animal. What do you want from us? Money we don't have, an apology, revenge? He spun to face her. You've already destroyed our reputation, taken our assets, exposed us publicly. What more can you possibly want? I want you to understand, Scarlett replied. I want you to feel what I felt when you decided I was worthless, when you traded me like livestock, when you watched me walk down that aisle knowing I had no choice. We understand, Luna cried. We understand we made terrible mistakes. No, you understand you got caught. Scarlett stood, moving to the window that overlooked the gardens. You understand that your scheme failed. That's not the same as understanding what you did to me. She turned back to face them, backlit by the afternoon sun streaming through glass. I was 19 years old when a doctor told me I might never have children. 19. And instead of comfort or reassurance, you looked at me with disappointment, like I'd failed you personally by being sick. Scarlett's voice remained steady, but emotions she'd buried for months began surfacing. You stopped calling me your daughter. You started calling me your problem. Scarlett, Malcolm tried. I'm not finished. The command in her voice stopped him cold. For 6 months, I watched you replace me with Elise. I became invisible in my own home. And when your debts came due, you didn't ask for my help. You didn't trust me with the truth. You just sold me to the highest bidder and told me I should be grateful. Tears ran down Luna's face. Malcolm's hands shook. They looked smaller now, diminished, stripped of the power they'd held over her for so long. I spent my whole life trying to earn your love, Scarlett continued. Trying to be good enough, smart enough, valuable enough. But I never was I? Because you didn't want a daughter. You wanted an investment. And when I failed to yield returns, you liquidated me. We loved you, Luna whispered desperately. In our own way, we did love you. No, Scarlett's voice was firm, final. You loved what you thought I could become, the advantageous marriage I could make, the grandchildren I could provide, the social status I could secure, but you never loved me, the real me. The girl who preferred books to parties, who was better with numbers than people, who wanted to be valued for her mind instead of her womb. She walked back to the chair, but didn't sit. Instead, she pulled out a folder from her bag, placing it on the coffee table between them. What's that? Malcolm asked. Options. Scarlett opened the folder, revealing documents. I'm not cruel like you. I'm not interested in watching you suffer for entertainment. So I'm giving you a choice. Hope flickered in Luna's eyes. A choice. Option 1. I foreclose on everything. You declare bankruptcy. You lose the mansion, the name, everything you've built. You start over with nothing, which is less than what you gave me. Malcolm's jaw tightened. Option 2. I forgive the debt. Scarlett paused, letting that sink in. The house, the money, all of it. You keep the Blackwood name, you keep your home. What's the catch? Malcolm asked suspiciously. You sign a legal document relinquishing all parental rights and claims to me. You agree to never contact me again. You remove my name from the family trust. You publicly announce that Scarlett Blackwood Gray is no longer your daughter by mutual agreement. Scarlett's voice was ice. You let me go completely. Forever. Luna gasped. You want us to disown you. I want you to formalize what was always true, that I was never really yours. Scarlett gestured to the documents. Sign these and you keep your life. Refuse and I take everything. You have until Monday to decide. Malcolm stared at the papers like they were written in blood. You'd really do this? Walk away from your family, your heritage, your name? I already have. Scarlett collected her bag, preparing to leave. I stopped being a Blackwood the day you sold me. I'm just giving you the chance to acknowledge it legally. She walked toward the door, Silas falling into step beside her. At the threshold, Scarlett paused, looking back one final time at the people who'd given her life but never love. I don't hate you, she said quietly. I don't forgive you either. I'm just done carrying the weight of your disappointment. I'm done trying to be worth something to people who can't see value beyond currency. Scarlett, wait, Luna stood, reaching out. But Scarlett was already walking away, down the marble hallway, past the rooms where she'd spent 19 years trying to earn approval that was never coming. With each step, she felt lighter, freer. Outside, the afternoon sun felt warmer than she remembered. How do you feel? Silas asked as they reached the car. Scarlett took a deep breath, tasting freedom, like I just walked out of prison. They'll probably sign, Silas observed. Pride matters more to them than you do. I know, Scarlett smiled, the expression genuine for the first time in weeks. That's why I offered it. 3 months later. The paperwork came through on a Tuesday, the same day of the week Scarlett had received her infertility diagnosis, though she chose to believe that was coincidence rather than cosmic irony. Malcolm and Luna Blackwood had signed everything. In exchange for keeping their house and what remained of their reputation, they'd legally relinquished all claims to their daughter. Scarlett was free. She stood in the office that was now officially hers, not a borrowed space in Silas's penthouse, but her own office in a building she'd purchased with money she'd earned. Her consulting firm was small but growing, clients drawn by word of her brilliant analysis and ruthless honesty. The Meridian account closed, Silas said, appearing in her doorway with coffee. They still lived in the same building, still had dinner most evenings, but separately now. Partners in business and friendship, not obligation. Good, Scarlett accepted the coffee gratefully. Did they pay the full consulting fee? Plus a bonus, they want you on retainer. I'll think about it. Scarlett turned to the window, looking out at the city that had once seemed like a cage and now felt like possibility. Silas. Yes. Thank you for everything. For seeing me when no one else did. For teaching me that worth isn't something people give you, it's something you claim for yourself. Silas smiled, that rare, genuine smile. You would have figured it out eventually. I just accelerated the timeline. Still, thank you. He nodded, understanding everything she couldn't quite articulate. Then he was gone, back to his own empire, leaving Scarlett to hers. She looked down at the file on her desk. A new client, a woman whose husband was trying to defraud her in a divorce. The kind of case Scarlett now specialized in, people trapped in contracts designed to exploit them. She understood that particular trap intimately. Picking up her pen, Scarlett began taking notes. The woman would win. Scarlett would make sure of it. Because that's what she did now. She helped people trapped by manipulation find their way to freedom. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Thank you for the inspiration. I left my toxic family today because of your story. A stranger who needed to see someone survive. Scarlett smiled, saving the message. The gala speech had gone viral, spawning articles and discussions about arranged marriages, family manipulation, and the price daughters pay for their parents' ambitions. She'd become, inadvertently, a symbol. Not of victimhood, of victory. The intercom buzzed. "Ms. Gray, your 3 o'clock is here. Send them in." As the new client entered, nervous but hopeful, Scarlett stood to greet her. Not as Malcolm Blackwood's defective daughter, not as the woman who'd been sold for her father's debts, but as Scarlett Gray, consultant, strategist, survivor. The woman who'd been declared worthless and decided to prove the world wrong. Scarlett Blackwood was never chosen because she was broken. She was chosen because she was undefeated. And in the end, that made all the difference. If this story of transformation from sold daughter to unstoppable queen moved you, hit that subscribe button right now, because stories like this, where the underestimated become unstoppable, are what we're all about. Don't miss our next story. Subscribe and let's watch more people reclaim their power together.